Hello and welcome back to the channel. In today's video I'm going to be sharing with you how to cut and sew this stylish queen and neckline corset with asymmetric hemline. So this corset is from OGL Couture on Instagram. So if you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, please hit on the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up. So let's dive right into today's video. So to start, here is my pattern paper. I've marked my shoulder to bust, shoulder to under bust, shoulder to waistline. So for my waistline here, I'll be considering two lengths, which is 5 inches and a total of 7.5. So you can also add 8 inches to from your waistline. My pattern paper stopped at 7.5 and I'll make use of it. Next, I'll mark my shoulder divided by 2. I'll add ½ inch for it because of this dress has a sleeve. After that, I came down by 1 inch and I connected for my shoulder. So next, we're going to find our chest line, and to do that is your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. I'll go ahead to make or draw out a straight line at this point. After I'm done marking that, I'll go ahead to mark what I have at the shoulder, which is my shoulder divided by 2 plus half at the chest line. And I'll go ahead to connect drawing a straight line. I'll also divide it into 2, come out by ½ inch, and here I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4. I'll connect from that point to the ½ inch and to the upper part of this pattern. After I'm done connecting, I'll go ahead to mark my dart. So to mark my dart is my nipple to nipple divided by 2. My nipple to nipple is 7 inches divided by 2. I have 3.5 inches. I'll go ahead to mark this all the way to the lower part of my pattern, and I'm going to draw out a straight line connecting all the dots that I marked. So after this, I'll go ahead to mark my dart intake of 1 inch on both sides, and I'll also mark it at the lower part of my pattern. If you're on the plus size or a bit busty, you should consider using 1.5 inches on both sides of your pattern. And I'll just go ahead and connect this. Next, I'll place my curved rule, connecting my bust to my under bust, also repeating this at the other side of my pattern, and I'll go in with my marker to outline this to make it more visible for you to see. So next, you want to decide where your cup will start. I'll be using 2 inches for this because the cup we have there is a bit high. And I'll go back and mark my nipple to nipple line, join it to the one at the lower part. So after I'm done marking this, I'll go ahead to mark 1 inch dart intake at both sides. So if you're plus size, you should consider using 1 inch at the center part and 2 inches at the other side, or you can just share it equally as 1.5 inches at both sides. So now I'll just go ahead to use my marker to connect. After I'm done connecting this, I'll go ahead to insert my body measurement. I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake, replace and add my sewing allowance. Now I'll go to my under bust, mark my under bust circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake I have here, replace it and add my sewing allowance. I'll also mark my waist circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake, replace and add my sewing allowance. Use any sewing allowance of your choice. Go ahead to mark your hip circumference, measure the dart intake, replace and add your sewing allowance. So I also marked this at that 5 inches point that I made earlier on the pattern. I'll go ahead and connect all my pattern, and after that I'll be marking my bust dart. So to mark your bust dart is the difference between your shoulder to waist in front and your shoulder to waist at the back. My shoulder to waist in front is 17 inches. My shoulder to waist at the back is 15.5. So 17 minus 15.5, I have 1.5 inches, which I marked out on this pattern. So if you don't want to use a bust dart, just go ahead to use the same waistline for your front and back. At the chest line, I came down by ½ inch and I came in also by ½ inch. Now I'll connect it from the under bust part of my pattern to the ½ inch I came down from the chest line, which is also your corset bridge. So I'll connect from here to that point, and this is what I have. My cup on the other side, I'll mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2 and add half. Another way is to divide what you have here, or also come in by 1 inch at the side. So I'll just go ahead and make use of this, and I'll connect. Go ahead to use my marker to outline this to make it more visible for you to see. So after you're done doing this, you want to go ahead to connect this all the way to the armhole part of your dress, and I'll also go in with my marker to mark this out. I'll also go ahead to outline my armhole. So after this, for the Queen Anne neckline, I'll be using 3 inches or 3.5 inches, because if you notice, the neckline is close to the neck, and here I'll mark 2.5 inches. So go ahead to connect from this point all the way to that part on your cup. So on the lower part of your cup, you can also end up using 2 inches, which is also okay. So after this, I'll just go in with my marker and I'll outline this to make it more visible for you to see. So after I'm done outlining, you want to get rid of any bulginess at the yoke. So I'll mark 0.25 or 0.3 inches and I'll shed this out. This will serve as my yoke. And I'll go ahead to label my pattern as center and side. So all these measurements now, I'll also transfer it on the other side of my pattern. But before doing that, I'll be converting this to a 3-part corset. Come down by 1/2 inch on this point, and I will be curving or connecting it upwards. And from that side, I'll go ahead to also connect it to the other side of my cup. So when I'm connecting it, I'll go ahead to blend in my dart, match up with the sides of the cup, and I will connect. So if you're not using a buzz dart, you're not going to blend in your cup. So I'll just go ahead and use my marker to outline this. And after this, I'll just go ahead and label my pattern, and I'll be transferring this whole pattern to the other side of my pattern paper. But before transferring it, I'll just go ahead and cut out the unnecessary part I don't need. So while cutting here, I'll blend in the buzz dart and blend in the side and go ahead to cut it out. So at this point, if you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, please hit on the subscribe button. So after I'm done cutting this out, this is what I have. And I'm just going to blend up the upper part of my cup this way, and then we'll go ahead to cut out the lower part. And I'll also go ahead to tape or close up my bust dart before we go ahead to cut this out. So if you have any question regarding this pattern, please go ahead to also leave your question at the comment section. So after I'm done blending this right now, so on one side of the dress, you notice that is a bit higher, so I marked 2.5 inches, and I will connect it inwards this way, come out by 2 inches on this point, and I'll take it up. So after I'm done marking that point, I'll just extend this line all the way down. Now I'll go ahead and blend in my pattern this way, and I'll connect, and I'll start drawing out the asymmetric hemline at the lower part of the dress. So I'll just go ahead and blend in, and also blend in the side of this dart. So after that, I'll place my tape, and I'll coming down by 4 inches from my waistline, and I'll just go ahead to connect. So this is what I have for my pattern. You can go ahead to use the exact measurement at the lower part of your dress, or you can just add or use any measurement of your choice. So I'll just go ahead and I will outline this, and next we'll be cutting out this pattern. So at this point, if you find this tutorial very interesting and educative, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and leave your question at the comment section. I also noticed at the lower part of this corset, we have like a little design on it, like a zigzag. You can go ahead to cut yours that way, or just leave it like mine. After cutting out on this point, I'll go ahead to cut out the yoke part and the upper part of the cup. So for the upper part of the cup, the part that has I'll be merging it up as one piece, and I'll be doing that in the sewing part of this video. So this is what I have for the upper part, and now we're going to work for the back part of the dress. I've gone ahead to mark out all my basic measurement, and for this corset I'm using a zipper. So I placed my tape, and you notice that my shoulder to waistline is 15.5 inches, and I added extra 4 inches for the lower part, which is the longest length I have on one side of my waistline. So now I'll just mark out the neckline I used for the front. So the next step is to go ahead to insert your dart, and I'm going to mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2, and after that I'll go ahead to draw a straight line connecting all the dots that I marked. So after this, I'll just go ahead to mark my dart intake, I'll be marking 0.5 inches at both sides of my waistline, come down by 1 inch from the bust line. Now I'll be connecting this all the way to the waistline, and after connecting at this point, I'll go ahead to extend it to the lower part of my pattern, starting from the waistline to my blouse length. So for your blouse length at the back, if you want to give it a little curve, you can add extra 1 inch after the length of your blouse. So I'll just use my marker to outline this. So next, I'll insert my bust circumference divided by 4, add my sewing allowance, and I'll go ahead to mark my waist circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake, replace and add my sewing allowance, mark my hip circumference divided by 4 and add my sewing allowance. I'll go ahead and connect from the upper part to the lower part of my pattern this way. So just like I said earlier, if you want to have a little curve at the lower part of your dress, go ahead and just add that and draw out a curve. So I marked ½ inch at the waistline, and I'll extend this all the way up and to the lower part. This is to get rid of any bulginess at the back part of my dress. So if you want the back part of your dress to be a Queen Anne neckline, you can just go ahead and mark 2 or 3 inches and connect it to the neckline. But for this pattern, I'm just going to leave the back pattern as a basic pattern. So I'll be using a neckline of 1.5 inches. That is the depth of the neckline I'll be using, and I'll just go ahead to connect this. So if you want to use a lacing bar area for this, all you have to do is just cut out the zipper allowance, and you're going to go in about 1.5 or 2 inches after that line to create the lacing bar area. And the upper part, you can just create like a curve on top to have a loop. So I'll just go ahead and cut this out. After cutting this out, we'll move over to the sleeve of this dress. But you will notice that this pattern on one side is higher at the waistline and the other one is lower. So from here, I'll mark that 2.5 inches and I'll connect. So for the part on that 2.5 inches, if I want to cut it, I'll blend in my pattern this way. So I'll just create like a little curve also to fit in on the waist side of my pattern, and I'll be using this to cut out this side if I want to, and then use the full pattern and I'll cut the other side of my pattern. So I'll be using this basic sleeve pattern that I have already. So I marked my starting point. After that, I marked my elbow point and the total length of the sleeve. So after this, I'll just go ahead to draw out a straight line on those points. So the next thing you want to do is to mark your sleeve cap height, which is your bust circumference divided by 12 plus 0.5. Mine is 3.25. Go ahead to draw a line there, and I will label my pattern. So the next step you want to do at that point, your sleeve cap height, go ahead to mark your armhole circumference divided by 2. So after marking that, I'm going to place my ruler, and I will connect from that point all the way to the starting point of my pattern. Now I'll divide it into 2 and I will mark at the midpoint. So from that midpoint, I'll divide one side again and mark. From that point, I'll go up by half. So from the remaining side, I'll go ahead to fold my tape, mark, and from there I'll come down by ½ inch. Now I'll reconnect all these lines to form my armhole curve, or for the upper part of this sleeve. So I'll just go ahead and connect from that point to the midpoint, from the midpoint to the ½ inch at the lower part and the armhole circumference. So after this, I'll just insert my measurements and go ahead to use my marker to outline this. Next, you want to insert your elbow circumference divided by 2 and add your sewing allowance. Mark your wrist circumference or whatever measurement you're using there divided by 2 and add your sewing allowance. And I'll just go ahead and I will connect my pattern. After I'm done connecting, I'll just go ahead and I will cut this out. So after I'm done cutting, I'll be adding ½ inch on top, which will be serving as the joining allowance. So join us in our next video where we'll be stitching up this pattern, and if you haven't yet subscribed, please hit on the subscribe button.